Chicago native, this author has a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing degree from Chicago State University, home of the world-renowned Gwendolyn Brooks Writing Center. He released his first self-published work, Love, Something Infinite, and simultaneously launched Rainbow Room Publishing. After that, he added to his book series with titles including Love from Behind and Love Changes, along with another novel, the Rainbow Room Publishing Guide. This author is currently overseeing Rainbow Room Publishing's numerous publishing services, expanding its offerings to provide more opportunities for new authors and professionals in the creative arts. He's one of my favorite artists, educators, mentors, and rock of our community. Please welcome founder and publisher of Rainbow Room Publishing, Eddie S. Pierce Jr. Hi, Eddie.
Thank you. I am good. I say it all the time after I get an intro like that. There's a part of me on the inside that's like, bitch, who are they talking about? Bitch, that's you. Oh my God, he sounds amazing.
Well, I'm so glad that I get the opportunity to interview you one-on-one. We know each other personally, and you're just a light in my life. You actually are a veteran contributor as an author in this anthology, and you know the full scoop as to what this started from and how it became a 3-part series and what we should be expecting from that third piece. In the Blood, you actually have literary work that's inclusive of Scott Free. And then in The People, you have Urwy's Warning. Can you talk to me about the development of the entire anthology and what's part of your selection process when it comes to the authors that contribute?
Oh, excellent questions. So what I come to expect, that's why I love working with you. So in short, the anthology was born out of the idea that what I always say is the second half of the dream, that the company was started as a vehicle to get my own voice out, and then looking at how that same vehicle could supply and support as many other voices as possible. And so I would, oftentimes think, well, I can't publish that many books, individually standing on novels, by myself, even if they are self-published, all that quickly. So I started to look at other mediums, including an art magazine that's slated to come out sometime next year. But it allowed me to get all of these different authors, what I feel to be that sometimes most first vital publishing credit. I had that experience myself in my grad program at Chicago State, where I was published for poetry, ironically, and then published in an encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia of Identity. I did a piece on passing, the phenomenon of passing. And so I just remember how empowered I felt after that. It still was no idea that I would do the first book, that I would do a publishing company. And so you fast forward to roughly 2019, and I have been thinking about different ways that I could support different institutions and communities that I have been a part of, and still ironing some of those things out. But I was more so initially thinking scholarship, some sort of scholarship publishing, free publishing package, something to that effect. And we can speak to this, especially if we speak the same language when we're talking about God and spiritual matters, that God expanded my thinking, where I was thinking strictly about what money I had. And he said, well, you might not have a whole lot of money, but you do have all of this other, this vehicle, and work it, kind of thing. And so the initial idea was a writing contest, actually. It was meant to be a writing contest. It was meant to be one book. And to be quite honest, it's another one of those happy coincidences, quote unquote, mixed blessings. No one replied to the writing contest, right? And so I just started to say to myself, well, you know what? I got people that if I'm just trying to fill a book, and I want to give this opportunity to home first anyway. So, let's go back and talk to Ken about what he wrote years ago. Let's go back to Katrina, Crystal, Senya, who we've met in recent years, but still been about 5 years. Same with Dr. Hill. I think we met about 7 years ago. And so I knew that all this writing was out there, just like I knew that I was still sitting on a lot of things that I've written back when I was 9.
Yes.
And said that, hey, here's, the anthology, but I can't exactly remember when it more than likely grew into the idea of having 3 books when I looked at how many people that I wanted to try to work with, and also keeping it in a digestible form. So that's instead of 1 big book, we get to 3. I started thinking about the idea of the voices that, the company is committed to getting out there. They're the voices that we don't always hear. And, despite the fact that the company is open to, any client, any works, as long as it's not anything that's promoting negativity, hate speech, that sort of thing. But for this particular piece, there are not enough Black authors out there in the general market. So we are making this exclusive to them. And so you go from that to Senya, and learning in the process of working with her on her awesome pieces, Jayla's Johns. We'll talk about that some more at another time, but her children's literature piece. And and somewhere in there, because Senya and I we knew each other when I lived back in Chicago for about 2 years, most recently. And we would just hang out at the house. She, I, and Crystal, we would just kind of workshop and, things every so often. And that's why I got to see all this visual art, found out that she's done it all. And somewhere I'm introduced to the collection Witness, which is the eye motif. And I see those and I say, oh, I'm designing my own covers at this point. Now, I'm always saying go with a professional, what have you. I think I did a pretty good job. I especially see the improvement from one to the next, and wait till y'all see the third one. That's really going to be good. But I said, hey, here's an opportunity to work with a visual artist that I know, and she's already in the book. It makes sense, that we, as you see from talking to everybody, what's also happening with the piece is that it's meant to promote all their good works, not just their writing. That's why we have those extensive bios. And so it turns into that, and seeing the pieces, learning that they're 21. I think at the time I saw 6 or 7, and I just said off the bat, this is just divine order, what have you, how you want to put it. I need the first 3. Boom, boom, boom. That gets us abolition. That gives us Voyage. And the third one, and we'll show a picture of that. We'll more than likely do some sort of preview of it during the event, but I'll put it out there that it's called They Hid It in a Book. Okay. And that would be the cover for the third book. And of course, you see we're dealing with the colors, and I got into the idea of, I guess, borrowing a little from Senya, borrowing a little from working with Monica, people like you, that once again, God said, okay, let's look at your writing. That's great. How can we expand on that and turn this into something that's not just visually appealing in the sense of the front and the back cover, but what would this look like on a bookshelf? Let's give them the Pan-African flag. That gives you your connection. And even honestly, just on the practical side, the marketing side, it's a thing ideally designed to make you buy all 3. But as you see, each story and then each book stands alone all by itself.
So I actually figured that we were going to be taking color from the Pan-African flag and creating the last book as it will be covered probably with green. Am I correct? All right. Correct. So
and the homeland will be the title.
Yeah. So in talking about the artwork from the ones that we already have available to us, from Abolition to the series of Witness, inclusive of the last part, which is Voyage. I see a theme that is really, really huge in the people, is that you and I have discussed this before around us having this evidence that there is dysfunction in the Black community, but then there's also this evidence that we're welcoming and celebratory in our culture. Can you talk to me about the themes that resonated with you when actually building this anthology, From the Blood to the People, and now our upcoming Homeland?
It's so interesting how so much of this, I guess it's just how God works. It started from such a personal place. For years, you read that long biography. all that exposure to literature, I was always running into, you never got away from it if I wanted to, the Harlem Renaissance. And for me, it was just such this amazing thing that all these people that were all talented in their own right across a variety of the arts came together and made this huge, impactful, not just statement, not just movement, but best example I could think of sometimes is those monuments that they talk about in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament. Every time something big and momentous happened, they would build a cairn, I believe is what you call it when you stack the rocks. But this idea that they left this lasting testament of our greatness that can always remind us of who we are. And I always thought to myself, well, hey, I would love to be a part of something like that. I always envisioned that someone else would build the mechanism and that I would just kind of be plugged in. But here was an opportunity where I could say, as I often love to say, that, here I am. Yeah, in an art sense, I want to make art and put art out there. The publisher is looking at those aims too, as well as the idea of, finance. And so I said, well, if we're going to do this, if we're going to sell this, how do we make it attractive, affordable? How do we incorporate all of these different people and give this one long tying together theme situation? And so what I ultimately came up with was the idea that in that Harlem Renaissance and what I know of African cultures, more often than not, differences were celebrated. There was a constant look at the idea of how those differences complemented each other and how they could serve the overall community. And so in this particular, anthology, that's what we're doing through literature. We're bringing in everybody's voices. We're bringing in their entertainment value, their inspirational value, their educational value, showing first and foremost to ourselves what's going on in our community, how we might envision a better community, the history of riding on the tail end of Dr. Hill, the idea of how our ancestors had nothing, and here we are, I'm sitting from my home, and for all intents and purposes, I'm broadcasting to television. Yes. Okay. They couldn't do that. Our parents, my parents are on a younger end of the spectrum. For somebody that's 44, they're in their early 60s. They couldn't do that. They couldn't do that in their 40s. So how much more can we do? How much more can we use these tools to not only advance our individual aims, but our family aims, our home aims, our community aims? I hope that got to the
yes.
Cousin.
You did get to the meat of what it is that I wanted to know, and it's a particularly great time to segue into the first piece that is celebratory in the people. It is Urwy's warning. So, in my opinion, it sets the tone as the opener for the second part of the From a Black Perspective anthology. It's an exciting piece that honors women for their purpose in creating life and sustaining mankind, and also honors men for their guidance and protection by way of war, care, and respect. The world's creatures and its elements, from the animals to the people, the youth, elders, our family dynamics and structure, and the culture are centralized in this piece. Can you share what inspired you to write it with such high energy as it pertains to our people?
One thing I love about this piece is that it was something that was, for the most part, pure imagination, and there was no thought of it ever being shared, anyone ever reading it. This was written, what is this? This is 2023. This was easily almost 15, 20 years ago. And as I mentioned in the piece, it was inspired by a dream, actually, a literal dream where of the first scene. The first scene is pretty much played out the way that I dreamt it, that the father and the son were sparring, and that the son in some way was not as efficient or what have you. And that's quite literally all that I recall dreaming. And then I can't even say that I got up and wrote it after that. I'm pretty sure it possibly was some days. But another thing, and this kind of goes to my note to everyone, don't throw anything away. Before I wrote that, before I had that dream, the character of Urwy was already born. She was, I can't remember if she had the name, but for anyone that gets into my reading and, you know, everything in the piece, you see a legend, a myth, her creation story, her origin story for us comic book fans. And that was written years before. Right. It's just that when I got to a certain place in writing the current story, it just fit. There was no dream about Urwy. You know, I had the dream about the first scene. I wrote from the first scene roughly up into, you know, some of the conflicts and things you see going on in the tribe. But the idea of this goddess and who she is and what she represents, all of that was written before. Here I am now finding that I'm writing a story with paying homage, so to speak, to the ancestors and to the homelands of the African continent. It was just, hey, she's already there, you know, and she fits. She fits. And I'm always excited to see people say, I read that and I had no idea that they were two separate pieces. They were never meant to be together. But
it seems like it was divine in time and season, Eddie.
Yeah, definitely.
Write it with this, you know, realization through your dream after already having Urwy's creation story created seasons before in your life, you know.
And I mean, and it, like I said, it turned into writing it. I think at most, I may have emailed it to some friends back then. I know that it was for anybody of a certain age, you may remember Facebook Notes. I had one of those. So in a sense, that was the first time it was published, in the sense that it was written and it was circulated. It was published. But as we moved closer to getting to the blood and me deciding, well, initially I wasn't even going to have a piece in, but I remember thinking, oh, how many people will crucify me if I don't write something. And I said, well, rather than write something, I mean, there's some stuff in here that's relevant. Let's go back. And, you know, it's a combination of things written as a hobby, things written in my grad studies, especially, and, you know, just at different points over the time. But when it came to just this, it was just the way that the art has been moving for me. The growth of the company has been moving for me. It's been organic in a sense. And so when we get from, this is probably one of the times I broke my own rule where I tell people, you know, write first and everything else comes after that. Everything comes out of that, excuse me, not necessarily after that, but out of that inspiration. And so on some level, maybe subconsciously, before I knew that story was going to go in here, I had already picked Voyage. And when I looked at Voyage and I looked at a couple of other pieces, I said, oh no, this is where Urwy goes. But when I wrote it, there was no conscious idea of a message that I was trying to give to anyone. It was a lot of what organically happens for us, and why we have to be careful as writers when we encounter a lot of stories, how much of that we pull into our stories that actually belongs to someone else. And if you do that, you know, be mindful to give credit where credit is due. So that's how I get to the fact that I always explain to people about Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. This is what he depicted. And if I remember correctly, there's not as much surrealism. But I know on some level that when we get to certain action scenes, that was born out of, you know, cartoons, comic books, that sort of thing. If she is this goddess and she is unfortunately in a space where to make her will known has to use her fists, she's gonna bring it, you know. She's my personal storm. More power
than a mortal person.
Exactly. She's a goddess. So I mean, she's gonna bring it. You know, so anybody that's trying to get what we're talking about, even just look for that one line. She moved like a glittery gold sandstorm. Just
I love that piece.
Mowing folks down.
I loved how this piece was the opener, and then we had a more celebratory piece toward the end. Given that, you know, this is the voyage, at some point we had some things that are, you know, more or less viewed as pitfalls within our history. And sometimes we lose sight of, even throughout those pitfalls or those trials and tribulations, that we should always be more aware of how celebratory we can be. The praise should be high, regardless of what we're going through. So I can appreciate this story along with the other stories contributed in the People, Eddie. Now knowing, that we'll have the Homeland coming into play here soon. And then you've probably got all of these different thoughts swirling with other themes and how you can keep the momentum going with doing shared pieces such as anthologies. What is it that you're looking forward to having other authors contribute, to develop another series of anthologies, if you would?
Okay. So, I think you did kind of touch on this earlier, but I'm really gratified to say that there are several people in the back pocket for the Homeland. There are several that are confirmed, and the final notifications or what have you will be made in the end of May. So, that's kind of already wrapped up, and we're looking to bring in, a couple of veterans, but also, as I explain to them all the time, and I love, honestly, how excited they got about this. And they were like, oh, you got to put me in number 2. You got to put me in number 3. And it turns into a thing of, well, we got you out there. You got some pub, and now you got your own thing going on in your own company. Let's just go ahead and put out your first book. This was meant to be a platform, a springboard for you to launch out, whether it's with my assistance, on your own, or any other company. But as far as the others, it kind of comes back to what you talked about before about, even the inspiration for this anthology. I looked back at the high school, the college, undergrad, and grad. I looked at the, as of now, 3-4 church homes that I've ever belonged to between Chicago and Dallas. And at the time, once again, the idea was a scholarship. Can I get them like maybe $2,000 each once a year at some point? And we work into that. And God already said to me, it's going to be more than 2,000 because you're on the right path. But it turned to me once again saying, okay, well, this is what I don't have. Let's not focus on that. What do we do have, and how can we work it? So it's already been in discussion, honestly, for a couple of years now that I've been talking to all of those spiritual mentors of mine about us coming together for a one-shot anthology. Title's already in my head, Devotion. Every one of them contributing some sort of inspirational writing. It can even be a sermon. From my educational experience, I read collections of sermons, particularly during the Jim Crow era and just before the end of slavery. And it was so impactful. And so thankfully, since the conversations have already started, and in a lot of instances, these people already have material, much like the people that, got into these works, we could conceivably, the goal is to have that out for Easter of 2024. So 2 months behind the Homeland is the goal. The other one that's at the top of my head right now, I get a lot of requests for young adult literature. And so I do have already done some reviews, honestly, of several, well, at least one. Let me take that back. And when I say reviews, I mean I've read them, but in the professional sense, put something out there. One of my best friends from college, one of the people who inspired all of this, inspired the name Rainbow Room Publishing. I put the name out there, Yvonne Winbush. Her daughter, Jordan Winbush, who is a freshman now at LSU, Louisiana State University. And she did a book in high school when she was a junior. There was an awesome program that gathered up all those students' writings, but instead of an anthology, they did all do a one-shot book. And hers was amazing, and it definitely fits into that young adult category. And I believe that, if I remember correctly, she dropped a second book before graduation from high school. My own niece, putting the name out there, calling things as to be, Promise Gardner. I have been looking at her writing. She's a freshman at Illinois State University, she's University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, if I remember correctly. It's so many of them. It's a lot of nieces and nephews. But I've been looking with her and talking with her about her writing. There's a younger cousin on my father's side, Victor McCullum Jr. We talked about that young man. I got to plug it real quick. This was a couple years back, but he couldn't have been more than maybe 6th or 7th grade. He and 3 or 4 other young men were making, much like I did as a child, but with paper and literally with the college rule paper, with the 3 holes and binding it with the wrappers from your paper, the twist ties for your bread. That was how I made my books. These gentlemen, all into the computer, they're pulling images from everywhere. They're writing the stories. They're their own writing team. And I told them, I said, I got to come back to you about this, cousin, because there's a bunch of stuff going on. But those are people that I'm looking at. A cousin just came down and visited. And I have to admit, some of these people now, they themselves are not the straight up, at least what I read, traditional young adult age of 12 to 18, but it's more so about the characters and the content being suitable for that age, reflective of that age. But one of my cousins who's not 30 yet, been talking to him forever, he came to visit Dallas not too long ago, well, Fort Worth, and it was an opportunity to get into that conversation with him and with his wife, who I love, who also edits. Just remind him once again that, hey, this opportunity is here. We didn't jump on it before because there was a newborn coming. And I even told him, don't feel pressured. That experience of being a father is going to somehow inform your writing. So you do some living, because Sanya talked about this in some other interviews. And I think the very last event we did for this, the idea that writers not only have to write and read, but we have to live, we have to experience. We have to study human behavior. We may not write those specific scenes, but now we can write about how those people move, speak, and flesh out, characters. But there is, and this is the idea that's only a couple of months old. But the idea is that we're going to gather those young, more than likely, Black and brown, we'll say right now, authors and their writings into a one-shot deal. And it'll be the same thing for everyone in those anthologies that's going on with this one, in that everyone is set up with their own individual stream of income. There's nothing coming back and forth between me and them. This is my dream coming true, to be able to publish as close as possible in the traditional sense, where the publisher orchestrates and pays for everything. Only difference being in this case is that the authors will pay for their individual books if they choose to, have books on hand, that sort of thing. But there's already pretty much a passive mechanism in place that will help them to further their participation in this book and in this work, as well as the ability for them to honestly earn whatever they need if they choose to go on and publish a solo work, once again, either with me, which comes with a discount because we've done this and they've done so much to support me. And to be quite honest, particularly if a piece in the book is an excerpt of their longer work, we've already started the work, so I'm not going to charge you what I would charge someone else that's coming from scratch. In the sense of that, we got those collaborations. And then I mentioned the idea of an art magazine, which will, the name has been picked forever. There's a logo, Kaleidoscope. It mirrors Rainbow Room Publishing. And the beautiful thing about that is, where Rainbow Room Publishing is set up for profit, Kaleidoscope is an opportunity to set up a not-for-profit. But it will be digital and print on demand. And that's where I really get to expand what I'm trying to do, in the sense that this, like I said, art magazine, not to be confused with literature magazine, not placing one higher than the other, just what I'm interested in this case. But it'll be the opportunity to have live video, well, not live, but videos embedded in the digital copy, sound links for music. I'm coming for the musicians, the hairstylists, the tattoo artists, the skateboarders, the coders, the hairdressers, everybody. And we're looking at how we can feature all those different people. And in a sense, we're giving them, much like the writers that will also appear in it, that first vital publishing credit, something if they don't have anything else that they can put on that resume, put into a press kit, and ideally get their work out even further.
Well, I'm truly excited and actually shocked of all the things that are already, in play with Rainbow Room Publishing. I want to thank you so much for continuing to be a front runner for the literary community, and also for the world of fine arts, because I can actually see this being expanded into other great works, even inclusive of film, as ties with literary work. I mean,
on the list,
doing an amazing job, and you guys just don't understand how mechanically well Eddie operates from an operational front, from being there on the back and the front of the scenes, being able to, speak on the behalf of people he's working with and collaborating with. We just truly appreciate you for your hard work. Thank you so much for spending some time with me in terms of our focus for this virtual event, and I can't wait for it to happen. Remember, guys, on April the 23rd, meet us and actually beat us there for the virtual reading for the From a Black Perspective, The People, Part 2 of a 3-part anthology. You have anything else that you'd like to cover today, Eddie?
Only honestly was just my emphatic infinite thanks for you. You know how we do.